Hello everyone and welcome to The Reality Is. My name is Alysha.
And my name is Sanjana.
And before the show starts, we'd like to let viewers know that the values and opinions that are expressed on the show do not necessarily reflect the values of Close Look Productions. They're our values. You have to do it with me. I just feel like they're our values and ours alone.
Oh, was I supposed to say it with you?
Sure. And then also we have a sponsor as usual.
Thank you, Surrey Honda. Please do check them out at surreyhonda.com, and you can check them out at 152nd Street and Fraser Highway as well.
Awesome. Beautiful. So let's get started with the show. We're going to be talking a little bit about colorism. And honestly, I feel like Sanjana and I, we still don't fully grasp the subject. But it's really interesting for us to talk about it and see where the connections lie and where we might have misconceptions. So let's just get into it.
Yeah. So what exactly is colorism? And it sounds so familiar to racism. So what's the difference?
Well, firstly, colorism is really, really, really recent. The topic, the word itself. I think it was coined in 1983, but I remember even looking at Instagram, I was like, oh my god, colorism is another ism that I don't really know much about, right? But based upon wonderful Google, colorism is the prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a dark skin tone, and they're typically from the same ethnic or racial group.
Okay.
So I feel like it's just to make it simple, I feel like it's just a skin type preference.
Okay, sounds good. And then racism is more you're kind of associating the skin color kind of with a race and the culture behind it as well. And then you're kind of discriminating based on that?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it's you see a skin color, whether it's dark or light, and then you attribute to a race, and then you're racist. I mean, you don't have to be racist, but we're talking about racism.
Don't be racist.
And I think racism is also a systemic issue. So when we say that, I think it means there's these things in our society that are there to help us, the law, I don't know, what else, education system, healthcare and stuff, but they're inherently biased, and they're inherently treat people differently.
Okay.
Right? And then I guess that's what the difference is between colorism and racism is colorism is of course we're treating people differently. It doesn't have to get to the point of being racist, but I think oftentimes it is.
Okay, sounds good. And it's so unfortunate because with colorism, it's happening in your own group or your ethnic group, which is so unfortunate because, even being South Asian, I know people who have experienced colorism, and I just wonder why would we do that, because our culture group is already receiving so much discrimination in some ways already.
And that group is inherently, okay, let's just talk about our group. Our group is inherently brown, right? And so, but somehow there is a level of value to one color kind of brown over the other. One shade is better than the other. And you're so right. You can see discrimination and prejudice within your group. Sometimes more than outside of a group. So Sanjana, what do you think are some ways that people get affected by colorism?
I've read about it a little bit, and in the 20th century, it actually kind of started to begin when they had a paper bag test, and basically if your skin color was darker than the paper bag, you were kind of discriminated against, and you were excluded from certain social groups as well.
Ooh, I feel like that's where they decide if you're worthy or not.
Exactly.
That's where they give you that label. If you're darker than the bag, this is how we're gonna treat you, and if you're lighter, then this is how we'll treat you also, right?
Yeah, and it's within the same race. This is happening in the African community as well. So, or during that time.
Yeah. Because this is not happening now.
Yeah.
It was back then.
Back then, yeah. And now we can see that, right now, there's already so much discrimination going on, like in terms of like discriminating against people who are like African American, and like 36% of them have been like discriminated against in terms of like going to jail at some point of their lifetime. And then with people who are even darker skinned, they actually have a 66% chance. So that chance kind of increases as well.
Yeah. And you know what that reminds me of? It was that show we did on implicit bias. So it's like, you know, these people, like there's two people that are in court and one person gets off or has a less harsher punishment than the other one. But we're this is occurring because we're actually being biased without knowing it. And then that seeps into like judgments made in court and how we like treat students, like teachers, how they treat students, and how we treat patients in healthcare. It's like we treat people differently. We all know that. We all treat people differently. It's just we get, I guess, like the kicker is not knowing that we do it and why we're doing it. So again, it's just a natural skin preference, and I think it's very innate in us.
Yeah.
But that's why it's like so interesting to talk about this, because I just recently realized that we do this, you know?
Yeah, it's so subtle, like you were mentioning. It's like implicit bias. Like I never realized that I might actually be even contributing a bit to colorism in some way until I actually started checking myself.
Article that we were reading too, and I don't know, it's a weird article, like just the way it's written. And basically they're saying that colorism is like different from racism, because they're saying like, you know, you could be treated badly, you could be, people can say hurtful words to you, but then they say like, oh, your teacher won't like deduct marks off of you because you're dark. And I'm like, okay, that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
But like that only works if that teacher is like not being implicitly biased or is just not racist. And because of course in these situations happen where kids will maybe some marks will be deducted or they're treated a little bit harsh, you know, during presentations. I don't know. But that's because those factors are in play for that to happen. So I don't know, I just thought it was such a weird article, and I don't think they're linking the fact that colorism oftentimes does become racist.
Yeah, it does. And it does have effects on people. Like they might not necessarily like take away opportunities or privileges from you, but it's so subtle that it might even be playing on a teacher's mind when they're marking your test or something.
Exactly. So yeah, it's interesting to see that it just seeps in so easily, like you said, and that's why it's such a big problem. And I'm sure we have experiences like where we've seen it. I mean, I know I have, and it's like quite problematic to see how prevalent it is without it actually being such a big issue that people are aware of.
Yeah, it is so prevalent. But yeah, again, because it's so subtle that it's so hard to detect sometimes. Like, for me, like, I didn't even realize this, but like if someone compared me to like someone else and said, oh, you look a bit darker than this person, for some reason that would be offensive to me. Or I don't know, like in India they have like these products like Fair and Lovely.
Oh yeah, Fair and Lovely.
Yeah, and then I started to think like, oh my god, wait, so we would never discriminate, or we wouldn't want to discriminate against someone who's maybe like from the South Asian community or who has darker skin, but this seeps into our minds and we don't even realize it, that we're actually, you know, upset, or I was upset to be called maybe darker than someone else, like as if that's a negative thing.
Yeah, it is, and it's like, so this is so prominent that there's a market out there for people that are going to buy that kind of product, right? For me, this is like really interesting, and I told you this example, but I was just talking to my grandma and I was like, you know, like people who are more fair skinned, you know, or like, you know, a lot of times, you know, Caucasian people, like they go to the beach, they get a tan, you know? And then I said to my grandma, meanwhile, our, like, you know, darker skinned people, they run away from the sun. And my grandma agreed, and there was nothing inherently racist about what I said. It was just kind of like, I guess it was just like this inherent like thought that everyone in that culture has, and it's like goes untouched. And then when I thought about it, I was like, oh, isn't that like a coloristic thinking, or like you know, like assumption or something, you know? So I just thought that, like, again, you don't have to be like you don't have to be so overtly, like, I don't know, like overtly being preferring one color over the other. It's even saying subtle things like that that's also part of, I don't know, this issue.
I remember, like, even like family members sometimes like preferring certain kids who are fairer over others, or you know, even saying like, oh, she looks so much prettier, like look how light her skin is.
Yeah, and yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, like, even just little things like oh, she shouldn't wear that suit, or that color, it makes her look darker. And even I would catch myself years ago being like, yeah, like she looks darker, but now I'm like, you know, let's actually take back these labels and just celebrate that, you know, brown is brown, and it's okay to be on different ranges, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Just appreciate it, you know, celebrate it. So yeah, this was like a really cool conversation.
It's a cool conversation.
It also makes me think about like what I also do in my daily life to contribute to it, and also to like stand up against it, right?
Yeah, I think that we realize that the reality of the situation is that colorism is something that's very subtle, but it's very prominent in our society, especially. It's a form of even maybe racism sometimes, towards people in our own racial identity, in our own groups as well. And I think that everyone has had some form of experience with it, and maybe now after watching this video, you'll maybe catch yourself kind of thinking that way sometimes, but now that you have that awareness, you can actually change that.
So yeah, another really good show, really interesting topic. And I think, I mean, we encourage you guys to learn more about it and kind of see what you do to contribute to this issue. And before we go, we just want to let everyone know, as we are associated with Close Look Productions, they have their 4th annual talent show, and we have a cool ass poster coming up. So registration is open until October 31st. And this is just calling like every youth, like performers, musicians, singers, right, artists. You know, now's your time to shine. So please go to cluefoundation.org, where you will find the registration form. And yeah, we look forward to these nominations. Anyways, that does it for us at The Reality Is. And guys, go get inspired.